We are in our series, Heroes of the Bible, and someone asked that I do Rahab from the book of Judges. So today we're going to talk about Rahab, which I think is wonderful. If you remember back, Moses brought the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt, out of Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, and they were supposed to go across this little wilderness area that probably takes a couple of weeks to cross if you're marching, and then enter the land of Canaan. And Moses sent in 12 spies? Moses sent in 12 spies to check out the land of Canaan. And they were ready to go in and conquer and take over and have the people of Israel in the land of Canaan. But when the 12 spies came back, 10 of them said that we're like grasshoppers in the eyes of these people. They're terrifying. We cannot enter this land. 2 of them, a guy named Joshua and a guy named Caleb, said, "Oh no. The place is milk and honey, and there's grapes, massive grapes, and it's a fantastic place. We should go in and conquer it." But the 10 spies convinced the people not to go in. So then God said, "Well, that's fine. Then you can't go in." And then afterwards they went, "Oh, we really made a big mistake. We probably should go in." And then they tried to go in on their own, and they lost. They lost a couple of battles, and then they gave up on that. And they spent the next 40 years in that little wee wilderness area, kind of wandering in the wilderness wanderings. Remember, God fed them with manna, took care of them, their shoes didn't wear out. But they didn't get to enter the land, this wonderful place that God had promised. Until every man that was 20 years of age or older when God first was going to let him go into the land, because that's the age in Israel in those days that you could enter the army, until every one of those people died. So when the last one finally died, then they were allowed to enter the land again. Now, the two people that got to live through that were Joshua and Caleb. Joshua and Caleb, the 2 spies that wanted to enter, were allowed. And Caleb was given wonderful properties. He turned them into a city of refuge, and he was a tremendous man. And the other one was Joshua, who ended up leading Israel after Moses was done. So now they're going into the land for the second time, and Joshua says, "I think I'll only send 2 spies." And I bet you he was very careful about the 2 spies that he sent in. But that's where you pick up the story of this woman named Rahab. And that is in Joshua chapter 2. Rahab and the spies. Then Joshua the son of Nun secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went, and they entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab, who was there. Oh, and they stayed there, sorry. The king of Jericho was told, "Some of the spies of Israel have come to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent a message to Rahab, "Bring out the people who entered your house, because they have come to spy out the land." But the woman who had taken the 2 men and hidden them said, "Oh yeah, they did come here, but I didn't know where they came from, and at dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, the men left, and I don't know which way they went. So go after them quickly, you might find them." But she had taken them and hidden them on the roof, under the stalks of flax that were laid out on the roof. That's how they used to dry their flaxseed, up on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road in the fords of the Jordan, and as soon as the pursuers were gone out and the gate was shut, before the spies lay down for the night, she went up and said, "I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and a great fear has fallen on us. And all of us who live in this country are melting with fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the Red Sea for you, and when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites, east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. We heard it, and our hearts melted. And everyone's courage failed because of you, for the Lord your God is the God of heaven, above all on the earth. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us. Our lives are your lives, the men said. So, this prostitute Rahab, now, she's called a prostitute here, and in the New Testament she's mentioned 2 more times, and she's called a prostitute there. So that was what she did for a living. It wouldn't have been a big deal in Canaan. It would have been a common occupation in Canaan. Now, whether she was a temple prostitute or not, or just an average one, we don't know. Josephus, early Jewish historian, he said that she was an innkeeper, which might also have been possible. She might have, this house that she had was very possibly an inn, and that's why the spies came and stayed with her, right? And then that's how she was able to protect the spies. And that's how they said, well, she came, there are just people coming to stay at my inn. You know, how would I know any different? And they've left. And that was a lie, of course, because she was protecting them. But notice that she said, this fear has fallen upon all of us because of what they did to Og and Sihon. Now, Og is mentioned in the Bible because he had an 8-foot bed made out of iron. An iron bed wouldn't be a big deal now, but in the Bronze Age, when iron was just coming around, that was an unbelievably expensive thing to have, right? And Sihon was another king. And it reminds you that when they were out in the wilderness wandering around, they weren't just sitting there by themselves. There were people that were trying to stop them and fight them, right? And the Israelites had at least these 2 groups that these guys know about. Now, the Amorites were Canaanites. They were from Canaan. And these 2 groups of people, the Israelites defeated them. So the people from Jericho, they had heard this 40-year-old story about the crossing of the Red Sea, and they had heard about their defeat of these other kings, and they're terrified. They're like, oh, man, you know, they could come in here and kill us. So when the spies come in, Rahab clues into this, and she goes, oh, I know who you guys are. Now, I don't know if she knew right away, but then eventually she did, right, because she hit them. And she said, please protect me and my family when this whole thing comes. My daughter said that. She said, well, I don't know that she was so interested in God. She was just looking after herself. Not a bad thing to do, though, right? I mean, you know, if you know that God is going to come and kill you, it might be a good thing to do something so that doesn't happen. And that's what Rahab did. That's how she starts out. Now, our lives are your lives. So she let them down by a rope outside the wall. Remember, the same thing they did to Paul that time. For the house she lived in was part of the city wall. Now, Jericho's walls, they thought, were probably 30 feet wide. They thought they were 12 feet high, maybe some places as high as 30 feet high, and they were 30 feet wide. And so you could easily have a house inside these walls, and many people lived inside the walls. And so that's where she lived, and that's where they allowed them down. They said some of the walls in the old cities, they were wide enough they'd have chariot races around the tops of the walls and stuff. So she said, go to the hills so that your pursuers do not find you, and hide yourself for 3 days. So she knew their routine. So she said, go to the hills, hide yourself for 3 days, and then go on your way, you'll be fine. And the men said to her, this is the oath that oath to you, made to swear, and it will not be binding on us unless when we enter the land, you hang a scarlet cord outside of the window, through which you let us down, and you have brought your father, your mother, your brother, your family into your house. If anyone goes outside the house, their blood be on their own head. We will not be responsible. As for anyone inside the house, the blood will be on our head, if a hand is laid on them. But if you tell what you are doing, we will be, if you tell anybody what we've told you, what we're doing, we will be released from the oath that you made us swear. So they basically made this oath with her, right? So get everybody in your house, hang this scarlet thread, this scarlet cord outside of the window. Now, these spies don't know what's going to happen in Jericho. They're probably thinking, well, we're going to go to Jericho, and when we go into Jericho, we're going to defeat that whole land, but we're going to see the cord, and we'll tell everybody in our army, leave the lady with the cord, leave that place alone. and defeat everybody else, kill everybody else, but leave her alone. So that's the pact that they make with Rahab. Agreed, she said. Let it be as you say. So she went away and departed, and then she tied a scarlet cord in the window. And when they left, they went into the hills for 3 days, and then went back. And they went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua the son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened. And Joshua said, the Lord has surely given this land into our hands. The people are melting in fear. So Joshua doesn't know what's going to happen either. He just knows what God's telling him, right? Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped and crossed over the river. Now this part here is they're going to cross over the river Jordan, and they have the guys go to the river Jordan, and they're carrying the ark, and some of the guys go out with these stones. They cross the river and they place these stones, and God stops the river Jordan. Very much like the crossing of the Red Sea. He stops the river Jordan, and Joshua's people cross over. Now, I think it's mainly just the army that crosses over here. I'm not sure how many of them do, but it's the army that's going to, they're the main ones, right? And he's got the priests with them. They're carrying the ark, and they get over to the other side of the river. And God says, now what I want you to do is you've got your 7 guys playing the horn, playing the trumpet, but it's a ram's horn, I think, that they're playing. And then you've got your ark, and then you've got your soldiers. And what I want you to do is you're going to walk around the city. Nobody says a word. You're just going to walk around the city every day for 6 days. You walk around the city once. And then on the 7th day, he says, I want you to walk around the city 7 times, and then blow the trumpets, and everybody shout. I'm going to tell everybody to shout. So that's what they do. The people in the city are watching them as they walk around the city once a day, and then they park outside, and they can see them from the city walls. They can see what's going on, right? And there they are walking around the city, and on the last day they walk around 7 times. And a part of me said, how can they walk around the city 7 times? Like, how small is this city? Well, it turns out the city, what they figured from the excavations that they did is the city proper, the main city is just, the main stronghold is a couple of acres, and the whole city's about 9 acres. And I checked the thing and said, how big is the city block? And they said, a normal city block is about 5 acres. So really this thing's about the size of a block and a half or 2 blocks. And it had about 1,500 people in it. That's how big it was. But it was a heavily, heavily fortified city, right? So that's why they could walk around it 7 times in one day. And that's how many times they got around. So they do. She's in her house with it. She brings her family into their house. They walk around the city 7 times. And then they blow the trumpets and they all shout, and God crushes the walls on the city. Now I've heard lots of things about this since, and I have no idea if there's any truth or falsehood to any of this stuff, but there was a book written called Angels on Assignment, I think, and he said that he got to meet with angels, so I barely believe this. But I did like the story anyway, and they said to the angels, what did you like best? They said, we liked pushing the walls of Jericho down. That was a hoot. We really enjoyed doing that. So then the angels destroyed the city, and this guy said they really enjoyed destroying the city. And there's other people who say when they look at the archaeology, it looks like all of the walls have been destroyed except one section, which was probably Rahab's house. So you hear all of this kind of stuff. You don't know if there's any truth in it, but the thing that you know is true is that God destroyed all of those walls, and the people in Rahab's house were absolutely fine. They weren't hurt at all. So Rahab did this thing for the spies. Now, in her people's eyes, she would have been a complete traitor. You know, like it depends on who's writing the book, but it's been written by the people who won, and of course, her coming over to their side was the right thing to do. And to follow God is always the right thing to do, and that's what Rahab did. And so now she survived, and everything's fine for Rahab. And Rahab then. So they beat all the people in the place, and Jericho falls, and I forgot the circumcision thing, but I guess we won't worry about that. Circumcision was a very important thing, And they always did it from Abraham's time on, but when they entered the desert, nobody did it for that 40 years in the desert. So before they entered, they had to renew that covenant with God before they entered, which is kind of important too. God had this little covenant, you wouldn't think much of it, but God said, no, you've got to renew that covenant before I'm going to allow you back in. So they defeat Jericho. By the way, the very next place they fight is Ai. Ai is a little place, should be no problem at all. But remember the guy stole some stuff. Achan stole some stuff. And they couldn't, was it Ai they couldn't defeat, or was it at Ai? It was Ai they couldn't defeat, right? Yeah. And so then they have problems later. But Jericho with Rahab did all of that. So why is Rahab a hero then? Well, for one thing, she sided with the people of God, right? I mean, she lived a life that we would find kind of weird, but she chose to side with the people of God. And what does the New Testament say about her? The New Testament, in the book of Hebrews, she ends up in Hebrews chapter 11, which are all the people of faith in the book of Hebrews. And in chapter 11:29 it says, by faith the people passed through the Red Sea onto dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell after people marched around it for 7 days. By faith the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. So that's where Rahab becomes a hero, is that she had faith in God. And then James, interestingly enough, in chapter 2, now where do I want to start that? He says here, in verse 20, chapter 2:23, the scripture was fulfilled. Abraham believed God, it was credited him as righteousness. He was called God's friend. You see that a person is justified by what he does, not by faith alone. In the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. So Rahab is mentioned 2 times in the New Testament. Like, that's how important she is. Any kind of a mention in the Bible, you know, you got to be someone of great renown. So then again, why is she so important? Because when she gets back, she becomes one of the Jewish people. Her family becomes a part of it, and she marries a guy named Salmon. I'll say Salmon because Salmon sounds like maybe he was a fisherman. Who knows? And they named him after the fish he caught. But so she marries this guy, and that's the last you hear of her. She just marries Salmon, and she becomes a part of the thing. Well, why is she so important? Because in the book of Judges, there's a lady named Ruth. You remember Ruth? She gets her own book, Ruth. And the book of Ruth in some of the Hebrew Bibles is attached to Judges. So Judges and Ruth are one book. And Ruth was a Moabitess. And Ruth had a mother, Naomi, and her husband, Elimelech. They went down to Moab, they're the enemies of the Israelites. They're also the brothers of the cousins of the Israelites, because these are Lot's descendants, right? The Moabites. And Ruth went down to Moab, and her 2 sons married Moabite women, right? Orpah and Ruth. Orpah and Ruth married her sons, and her sons died. Naomi's sons. Her husband died down there. Her sons died down there. And then Orpah says, well, I'm going to stay with my people. Naomi says, yeah, that's what I expect. And Ruth says, no, I'm going to go back with you. And Ruth goes back to Judah with her mother-in-law. And then there are a couple of women on their own, and they're gleaning these fields, right, which is a very dangerous occupation. And there's a guy there named Boaz. And Boaz, he kind of takes a liking to Ruth. He likes that she's looking after her mother-in-law. He probably finds her attractive, I don't know. And that she's doing all this stuff. And he says to his men, look, when you're gleaning, when you're doing your harvest, leave a little bit of stuff behind. They're supposed to do that anyway, but he says specifically leave some behind so that Ruth can pick it up. And don't touch her, leave her alone. So it was a dangerous thing, you know, with men being men and women out in the field. And he says, don't touch her, because you're working for me. You're going to listen to me. And then Boaz, Ruth then makes a play for Boaz to show that she's interested in him. And then he goes to his kinsman redeemer, because the Jewish people had this rule that if somebody is related to you, right? So if you're married to a woman and you die, then that woman is supposed to marry your closest relative. Okay? You remember that with Tamar. Tamar was supposed to marry Judah's sons, and they wouldn't do it, and finally she has a baby with Judah, which is a crazy story too. But in this time, Ruth ends up with Boaz. Boaz goes to the kinsman redeemer, he's called, the closest relative, and says, are you going to marry her? And the guy goes, no, I'm not. And so they do this shoe thing that nobody understands, this passing of the shoe thing, I don't think. So they pass the shoe, and then he's allowed to marry her, and Boaz marries this Moabitess, Ruth. Boaz is the son of Salmon. So Boaz is Rahab's son. Isn't that an amazing thing? Yeah. So she becomes a Jewish Israelite person. Her son ends up marrying a Moabitess, and both those women are in the lineage of David. And if you're in the lineage of David, that means you're in the lineage of Jesus. And that's where Rahab ends up. She starts her life just as a normal person living in Canaan, doing the jobs that people did in Canaan. And then she understands that something is important about this God. And she comes to this God, and then she ends up marrying some guy in Israel, whose name is Salmon. And through that, she becomes the great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of Jesus. That's pretty special. And I think that makes her a hero. At first, she's just trying to preserve her life. She's smart. And then eventually, she ends up in the lineage of our Savior. Pretty cool. And because we don't have a real good opinion of prostitutes, generally, they don't care as much in Canada now as they once did. It also shows that your life can be radically changed when you come to God. And in our case, it is when you come to Jesus. Whatever the past was can be completely changed when you come to Jesus. It doesn't matter who you are or what you did. It matters to me, but it doesn't matter to God. Because God wants it. He wants us. Isn't that an amazing thing? One of my favorite passages in Revelation, it's an interpretation that the King James does different than all the other Bibles. Because in the King James, in Revelation chapter 4, it says, and for his pleasure we were created. And the others just say, by his will we were created. But the King James says, and for his pleasure. And I thought, oh, I like that a lot. That we actually bring pleasure to God. Can you imagine that? As stupid as we are, as terrible as we are. My friend and I do a podcast, and he always says, when God says, look at Job, he's my servant who I love. My friend says, look at Larry and Steve. They're a couple of morons, but they're mine, and I like that too. And that's Rahab. She was a person that followed God, and God completely honored her for it. And that's it for this morning. Are we going to play a song at the end? Go ahead, Norma. Oh,
he's shaking his head.
Is he shaking his head?
Tut, tut.
I'll shut this thing off.